Hello and welcome to Newsweek South Asia, your one-stop destination for in-depth analysis of security challenges, regional conflicts and the evolving threat of terrorism. Let's take a look at the headlines first. India slams Pakistan at UNSC, calls it global epicenter of terror. Udhampur encounter leaves one Indian policeman dead, search operation underway. And millions struggle to survive in Afghanistan amid food shortages. At the United Nations, where diplomacy is meant to temper conflict, long-standing fault lines in South Asia once again surfaced. India has delivered one of its sharpest rebukes yet to Pakistan at the United Nations Security Council, accusing Islamabad of abusing global platforms to push a divisive agenda while presiding over democratic collapse and state-sponsored terrorism at home. During an open debate on leadership for peace, New Delhi rejected Pakistan's attempts to internationalize Jammu and Kashmir and questioned Islamabad's credibility as a Security Council member. For decades, Pakistan has sought to internationalize Kashmir issue at multilateral platforms, often diverting attention from its own internal instability and security failures. That pattern resurfaced at the Security Council when Islamabad invoked Jammu and Kashmir and the Indus Waters Treaty during an open debate meant to focus on global peace leadership. India's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Parvatanini Harish, called out Pakistan for repeatedly weaponizing multilateral forums to target India, instead of addressing its own internal crisis and regional destabilization.
To the statement made by the representative of Pakistan today. India would like to reiterate that the Union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh are an integral and inalienable part of India. They were, are, and will always remain so. Pakistan's unwarranted reference to Jammu and Kashmir in today's open debate attests to its obsessive focus on harming India and its people. A serving non-permanent Security Council member that chooses to further this obsession in all meetings and platforms of the UN in pursuit of its divisive agenda cannot be expected to fulfill its designated responsibilities and obligations.
India also questioned Pakistan's suitability to sit on the Security Council, arguing that a state which prioritizes vendetta politics and misinformation over peace cannot be expected to uphold the Council's responsibilities. New Delhi firmly rejected Islamabad's claim that Kashmir must be resolved through UN resolutions, reiterating that the matter is internal to India and constitutionally settled. But the sharpest criticism was reserved for Pakistan's domestic political trajectory, one that India described as a stark contradiction to its rhetoric about the will of the people. Ambassador Parvathanini highlighted the imprisonment of former Prime Minister Imran Khan, the banning of his political party, and sweeping constitutional changes that consolidate military power beyond civilian oversight.
Pakistan, of course, has a unique way of respecting the will of its people by jailing a prime minister, by banning the ruling political party, and by letting its armed forces engineer a constitutional coup through the 27th Amendment and giving lifetime immunity to its Chief of Defense Forces. Let me be clear. India will counter Pakistan-sponsored terrorism in all its forms and manifestations with all its might.
Imran Khan has been behind bars since August 2023 with reports of prolonged solitary confinement. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture has warned that his detention conditions may amount to torture or other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment, concerns Islamabad has so far dismissed. Last month's 27th constitutional amendment, passed under Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, further entrenched military dominance by granting lifelong legal immunity to Army Chief and Chief of Defence Forces Field Marshal Asim Munir, a move critics say formalizes authoritarian rule. India also addressed Pakistan's allegations over the Indus Waters Treaty, underlining that New Delhi entered the agreement 65 years ago in good faith, despite enduring decades of conflict and terror emanating from across the border.
India had entered into the Indus Waters Treaty 65 years ago in good faith, in a spirit of goodwill and friendship. Throughout these 6.5 decades, Pakistan has violated the spirit of the treaty by inflicting 3 wars and thousands of terror attacks on India.
New Delhi reminded the international community that Pakistan's record is marked not by compliance but by persistent sponsorship of cross-border terrorism, a pattern that has claimed tens of thousands of lives. It is against this backdrop, India said, that it has decided to place the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance, a calibrated move framed as a response to Pakistan's failure to dismantle its terror infrastructure.
In the last 4 decades, tens of thousands of Indian lives have been lost in Pakistan-sponsored terror attacks, the most recent of which was a Pahalgam terror attack in April 2025, which involved religion-based targeted killings of 26 innocent civilians by Pakistan-sponsored terrorists. It is in this backdrop that India has finally announced that the treaty will be held in abeyance until Pakistan, which is a global epicenter of terror, credibly and irrevocably ends its support for cross-border and all other forms of terrorism.
India concluded its intervention with an unambiguous warning that terrorism will be met with resolve, not restraint. New Delhi made it clear that peace in South Asia cannot coexist with impunity for extremist violence or military domination over democratic institutions. For the international community, India's message was direct: accountability, not deflection, is the true test of leadership for peace. And Pakistan continues to fall dangerously short. On International Human Rights Day, the streets of The Hague, Netherlands, became the latest battleground for Baloch voices seeking global attention. Outside the Dutch parliament, activists from the Baloch national movement accused Pakistan of running a decades-long campaign of repression in resource-rich Balochistan, one marked by enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and the silencing of dissent. As Islamabad projects itself as a responsible global actor, protesters say the reality on the ground tells a far darker story. The protest, organized by the Baloch national movement, unfolded just steps away from Europe's political heart. Placards and banners detailed what demonstrators called systematic human rights violations carried out by Pakistani security forces in Balochistan. Violations, they say, have persisted unchecked for decades. Protesters at the rally accused the Pakistani state of targeting political workers, students, teachers, and ordinary civilians under the guise of security operations.
A nationwide struggle is for independent Balochistan from Pakistani occupation. For decades, international groups such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have reported serious concerns in Balochistan, including restrictions on political freedom, limitations on expression, and cases of enforced disappearance. These reports highlight a pattern of actions by the Pakistani state that deeply affect the daily lives, dignity, and security of Baloch nation. Human rights are universal and unconditional. Every person is entitled to safety, justice, opportunity, and the freedom to speak without fear. Yet, many Baloch families continue to live under heavy surveillance, limited representation, and fear of reprisals for raising their voices. These realities show why international community must pay closer attention to the situation in Balochistan. The global community must call on Pakistan to uphold the international human rights obligations, ensuring transparency, accountability, and the protection of rights of Baloch nation.
Human rights organizations have repeatedly flagged Balochistan as one of South Asia's most militarized and least transparent regions. Activists claim Thousands have vanished into Pakistan's security apparatus, with families left in limbo for years, receiving neither information nor justice. Protesters say the repression has now extended beyond men. Women and even minors, they allege, are increasingly becoming targets. The rally also drew attention to the mothers and sisters of the disappeared, women who have staged months-long sit-ins in Shal, Karachi and even Islamabad. Braving extreme heat, cold and rain, they hold photographs of loved ones who never returned. Yet protesters say their peaceful protests are met with arrests, intimidation and fresh disappearances. Activists such as Maharang Baloch and members of the Baloch Jagjati committee, they allege, have been detained and slapped with fabricated charges simply for demanding accountability.
For years, the people of Balochistan have been picked up without reason. They have been kept in the torture cells for Pakistan from decades. Students, doctors, activists, gone. Families spend their lives searching for answers that never come. Mothers hold one photo for 10 years, for 15 years, for 20 years, but no answers. That is our reality. That is the reality of Balochistan. That is the reality the world keeps ignoring. No community should have this fear of speaking. No community should have the fear of expressing their identity or simply demanding their human rights. Yet in Balochistan, fear has become normal. Pain has become normal. We are tired of being told to stay quiet. We are tired of our sufferings being treated as if they don't exist. Human rights mean nothing if they don't apply to everyone, including Balochistan.
Beyond disappearances, protesters accused Pakistan of carrying out drone attacks, village raids and military operations that have devastated civilian life. They warned that constant fear, surveillance and economic marginalization have pushed many in Balochistan into despair, with mental health crisis and suicides on the rise. Despite these allegations, protesters said Balochistan remains conspicuously absent from global Human Rights Day agendas. The United Nations and major powers, they argue, continue to look away, prioritizing strategic ties with Islamabad over accountability. The message from The Hague was unambiguous. Protesters called on democratic governments and international institutions to pressure Pakistan to meet its international human rights obligations, demanding transparency, accountability and an end to what they describe as collective punishment of the Baloch people. As Pakistan continues to deny allegations and restrict independent access to Balochistan, activists warn that silence from the global community only emboldens further abuses. Afghanistan is entering another brutal winter amid a rapidly deepening humanitarian crisis. Widespread poverty, shrinking international aid, and soaring hunger have left millions struggling to survive. The United Nations World Food Programme now warns that, for the first time in decades, it lacks the resources to mount an effective winter response, placing the country's most vulnerable families, especially children, at serious risk.
After more than 4 decades of conflict, Afghanistan remains one of the world's poorest and most fragile countries, with much of its population dependent on humanitarian assistance to survive. Years of war have devastated infrastructure, weakened public services, and left millions without stable livelihoods. Since the 2021 withdrawal of US-led forces and the return of the Taliban to power, international assistance has dropped sharply. The loss of foreign aid and development funding has triggered a severe economic downturn, pushing millions of Afghans deeper into poverty and leaving families with few ways to earn a sustainable income. This winter, already difficult living conditions are being further strained by soaring food prices, widespread unemployment, and the lingering effects of drought and earthquakes that have damaged homes, farmland, and water supplies. Many rural communities have seen harvests fail, while urban families struggle to afford even basic staples. For households trying to meet their most basic needs, heating, nutritious food, and healthcare have become impossible luxuries. Parents are often forced to make painful choices between buying food or fuel, delaying medical treatment, or pulling children out of school, decisions that carry long-term consequences, especially for young children and the elderly.
ژمی سختي زموږ دپاره خاصو وسم نشته چې خاص وهلوده هم ماشومه ده وسم نه کېږي بس همدومره راوړي چې ویې که چا راکړه خو سوځو یا ګنې ناست یو بخارۍ ته هېڅ وس نه کېږي.
The United Nations World Food Programme says malnutrition in Afghanistan has reached its highest level in decades, with children suffering the most. Aid workers warn that growing numbers of infants and young children are now severely undernourished, leaving them highly vulnerable to disease. Severe funding cuts have forced the agency to scale back or suspend food assistance to millions of people, even as winter temperatures set in and nutritional needs increase. Many families who once relied on regular food support are now being left without help. Child deaths are expected to rise during Afghanistan's winter months, when food is scarcest and access to healthcare becomes more limited. The World Food Programme estimates that 17 million people are currently facing acute hunger, around 3 million more than last year. The crisis has been further intensified by the mass return of Afghans from neighboring Iran and Pakistan under migrant and refugee return programs, adding new pressure to already struggling households and communities.
Soaring malnutrition is now placing the lives of millions of children at risk. We've seen dramatic aid cuts and cuts to food assistance, and the poorest Afghans are now asking themselves, how are we going to make it through the winter? Forced returns of Afghans from neighbouring countries, widespread drought, and a dramatic decline in food assistance across the country have created a devastating hunger crisis now affecting 17 million people.
Without significant and sustained international support, Afghanistan's humanitarian crisis could have long-term consequences for the country's future. Widespread malnutrition and poverty threaten the health, education, and development of an entire generation of children, while economic collapse and displacement make recovery increasingly difficult. Aid groups stress that rebuilding livelihoods, strengthening communities, and restoring access to basic services will be essential if Afghanistan hopes to break the cycle of hunger and instability. Otherwise, millions of Afghans may continue to face uncertainty and hardship for years to come.
A deadly encounter in India's Jammu region has once again highlighted the persistent threat of Pakistan-sponsored terrorism beyond the Kashmir Valley. The killing of an Indian police constable in Udhampur underscores how Pakistan-based terror groups are attempting to reopen infiltration routes and expand their operational footprint in the Jammu belt. Acting on precise intelligence, Indian security forces engaged terrorists linked to Jaish-e-Mohammed in a fierce gunfight, triggering a massive search operation.
Despite sustained counter-terror operations, terrorist activity continues to resurface in India's Jammu region, an area that has increasingly come under focus as terror groups attempt to expand their footprint beyond the Kashmir Valley. The gunfight broke out in Soan village of Udhampur's Majalta area on December 15. After Indian security forces acted on precise intelligence inputs about the presence of 3 terrorists. Officials say the terrorists are believed to be affiliated with the Pakistan-based Jaish-e-Mohammed, a UN-designated terror outfit responsible for multiple attacks in India, even as Islamabad continues to deny involvement. What followed was a close-quarter firefight in treacherous terrain, the kind of geography often used by infiltrators trained and pushed from Pakistani soil. During the exchange of fire, Constable Amjad Ali Khan of the Indian Reserve Police Force sustained critical injuries. Despite evacuation attempts, he succumbed to excessive blood loss, becoming the latest casualty in India's long battle against cross-border terrorism. One terrorist is believed to be injured, while the remaining terrorist escaped into the dense upper forest area, prompting an extensive cordon and search operation involving the Jammu and Kashmir Police's Special Operations Group, the Indian Army and the Central Reserve Police Force.
कल शाम को एक पुख्ता सूचना के आधार पर एक अभियान छेड़ा गया था। ये उधमपुर के मजालता पुलिस स्टेशन के अंतर्गत एक गांव आता है, उसका नाम है सोन। तो सूचना हमारी सही निकली, टेररिस्ट से वहां मुकाबला हुआ। ये एक एसओजी की बिल्कुल ही छोटी पार्टी थी और जब फायर फाइट हुआ उसमें हमारे लड़के अमजद अली खान जो पुंछ के निवासी थे, इनको जख्म हुआ। हमने निकालने की कोशिश की लेकिन ब्लड लॉस के कारण अनफॉर्चुनेटली वी लॉस्ट हिम। अभियान अभी जारी है और टेररिस्ट इनिशियल फायर फाइट के बाद जंगल की ओर भाग निकले हैं। जंगल को घेरा गया है और इसमें आर्मी और सीआरपीएफ की मदद से हम लोग कॉम्बिंग ऑपरेशन हम लोगों ने लॉन्च कर रखा है।
Search operations resumed at first light on December 16, with sniffer dogs, additional troops and surveillance assets deployed to track the militants who remain holed up in the forest. Officials say all escape routes have been sealed, a standard counter-terror tactic to prevent terrorists from slipping deeper into the hinterland. A wreath-laying ceremony was held in Udhampur to honor Constable Amjad Ali Khan, with India's police leadership paying tribute to what they call a sacrifice in the line of duty against terrorism. Udhampur's Basantgarh Majalta belt is not new to terrorism. Security officials describe it as critical infiltration corridor, one that Pakistan-backed terrorists have historically used to move from the international border in Kathua towards Doda, Kishtwar and eventually the Kashmir Valley. In recent months, Indian agencies have warned of renewed attempts by Pakistan-based groups to reactivate terror modules in the Jammu region, a shift aimed at expanding the conflict zone and drawing global attention. Just days before the Udhampur encounter, Indian forces arrested a Jaish-e-Mohammed terror associate in Pulwama and recovered a grenade, reinforcing concerns that Pakistan's proxy networks remain active despite international pressure.
When the operations against the terrorists has been carried out in Kashmir Valley and even in Jammu region, most of these terrorists who are remnants over there, and as per intelligence sources, there are approximately around 70 to 80 of them that are there. They have gone into the higher reaches of this Pir Panchal range, the Kishtwar, Doda and other ranges over there, and they are hiding over there. Now since winters have come in, these people have now to come down to get food, get their dry rations or get other things, provisions and all. And that is how these people have been found that though the security forces are on the job of tracking them, trying to locate them, but since this is a heavy forested region, this entire area, you can take this Balawar, Bani belt right up till Kishtwar, Doda and others to Anantnag. This is a heavy forested area and these people have made hideouts over there and are sitting over there. So this area basically is being used by them to sit tight and wait for instructions from ISI as to what is to be done next.
For New Delhi, the message is unambiguous. As long as terror groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed continue to find shelter, training and ideological backing in Pakistan, India's security forces will remain on constant alert. The Udhampur encounter is not an isolated incident. It is part of a broader, unresolved conflict driven by cross-border terrorism.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We'll be back next week with more news, views and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@anin.com. This is Shivangi Mishra signing off on behalf of the entire team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.